Hello, everybody. I'm not American. I'm Canadian, so it's a starting point for you. My American friends say, oh, you're the English-speaking Mexican, or they say, you still have some Canadian peso. Actually, I really like Mexicans, so I'm kind of flattered with these type of things. I'm Paris-based. You can't see it from there. And I work for a tech company called Avolta Partners, and I'll just tell you a bit about it. It's a French company. And I joined them about a year ago, and what's interesting with them is like every company has a good story, everybody has a view, everybody's wonderful. But in this case, it was started by 5 French entrepreneurs who'd sold their businesses, some of the most famous people on the internet. And what we've done is we said we wanted to be very technical about a very specific sector, and the sector is tech. Our first assumption, and we have very strong views even though we're salesmen, is that tech is a European sector today. That's our faith, it's our belief. So we look after customers across Europe, and we find it's a reality. If you look, I'm going to be talking to you about fintechs shortly. Fintechs are now European. Payment is European. You have things such as what you have here, TransferGo, Revolut. You also have the Estonian outfits, and a combination of different things. That's the first thing. The second thing we do is that we really very strongly that it starts at the beginning, and there are 3 means of financing today. So you may disagree. This is our pitch. You have equity, debt, and project finance. Project finance for us is ICO. So we believe very strongly that in the next 4 or 5 years, ICOs will overtake classical funding in significant numbers. And that's not the purpose of my conversation today, but it's just to give you a bit of a setting of how it works. My conversation today and my discussion with you is based on a combination of points. On blockchain, everybody talks about blockchain today. ICOs, everybody talks about ICOs, especially here. You're the 3rd largest country here in Lithuania to do ICOs. To talk about fintechs. And finally, what we're going to be discussing is how we have transparency in this world. So I'm going to start with something very simple. Fundamentally, everything about fintech, ICO, blockchain, all that is about money. Not currency, money. So I'm putting this slide up for you, just so you know that the world in this in the Bitcoin world, this is Bitcoin versus fiat. You'll notice, quite interestingly, that the euro is only 7%, Japanese yen is 48%, and 39% is USD. 39% USD means it's a lot of Hong Kong, probably emerging markets. It's a combination of things, but the behavior is different in the world than the rest. So anybody, has anybody heard Trichet or the European Central Bank governor? Sorry, who works for a central bank here? Who works for a market regulator? Who works for the government? Ministry of Finance? Hi. What do you do, please, sir? He's what? He's the minister? Okay. Great. Nice to have you on board. I'll have to be very careful with what I say. There's a lot of things I want you to take away from here. You're not going to remember what I said. You'll probably remember I'm Canadian and 2, 3 things about ICOs. I want you to remember a combination of things. First of all, we're in a world of trust, and it's improving. And if you're in Lithuania, I deal with Baltics, especially Estonia. I'm starting to discover Lithuania, which is really catching up with the Estonians, I think. My Estonian friends are telling me this. He says, watch out, the Lithuanians are coming. So it's kind of nice to hear if you're Lithuanian. But the reason why I'm telling you about the money thing is money, currency, and means are very complex issues. They're very, very profound. Money is a technology. Forget the rest. It's a tool. It doesn't make you good. It doesn't make you bad. When central banks say speculation is bad, it's wrong to say that. Some speculation is good. It brings you liquidity. It enables people to buy and sell. If you don't have liquidity, you have assets. So if you can remember that little thing, it's a good starting point. The second point I want you to remember is that you probably heard Mario Draghi or Jean-Claude Trichet saying cryptocurrencies are not currencies. They don't respond to what Aristotle said what money was. It has to be transportable. It has to be a store of value. It has to be put in small pieces and these type of things. So everybody's heard of Aristotle. So people are thinking, well, if Aristotle said it, he must be right. Well, Aristotle thought women did not have a soul. He was against democracy, so he's for a centralized organization. So be very careful about these people who give you these ideas about cryptocurrencies and money. Money is a technology. Currency is something else. A receivable is not a money. What's interesting here is that you'll find the world is global. The world of crypto is enabling us all to grow a bit more and to have a bigger, wider scope at things. I'm very pro-Europe, even though I'm not European. Because I think the euro is actually a decentralized semi-decentralized currency because you have 23 members at the central bank in Frankfurt deciding with the Germans, the French, what's going on. So I kind of like this transparency bit. You need accountability, transparency, and so on. I'll get to the ledgers in shortly. Eh? When we talk about blockchain, everybody talks about ledgers. We'll get to that very shortly. This is what we do. Okay, I'm a salesman. I have to give this to you. I'm sorry. Okay, so basically what we do is we design, advise, and invest in ICOs. We're six entrepreneurs. We have an Estonian one going. We have the funny ones that you probably would like to know about is the bottom left-hand one. We're working with Monaco, you know, the country, Monte Carlo, Monaco, and we're doing their coin. It's going to be a self-contained coin for Monaco. All this will be available for you. I have no problems with giving this to you. We work in Telegram. Everybody knows about Telegram. I'm working with a fantastic Estonian wallet called Sitowise. And probably our biggest claim to fame in this one is with transparency is this, ICOcharter.eu. What we did is we worked with the European crowdfunding network, the German crowdfunding network, and a combination of actors in this emerging world of ICO advisors. Don't ask me what an ICO advisor is. I can't tell you. Everybody is an ICO advisor, but I can't give you more specifics. It's a very moving target. What we try to do in the ICO charter is to build basically basic rules of attitude and behavior. We don't want to be regulated, so we want to regulate ourselves. Because I'm not sure the governments always regulate well. They are in democracies places of trust, but not necessarily efficient at what they do. So this is basically what we do. We don't just place the paper, we do it. We have a Singapore one, we have a Chinese one, we have 2, 3 French ones, as you can see, Estonian, and I'm looking forward to getting my first Lithuanian ICO, which I think is really, really important. When you have a token, you have money. If the token is successful, it is bought, it is money. It's the same thing as cash, which you got from a bond or equity. So we really believe that this whole new world is going to bring something new. ICOs have something extremely powerful to them, like the whole crypto world. It's it's marketing. It's global marketing. So when the regulators tell you, you know, we have to regulate, we got to protect people, it's a utility token, it's a security token, you're hearing all these things. I don't like certainty because the paint isn't dry in this thing. But tokens are neither utility nor security. Over the course of their lives, they will change in terms of what they're used for, how they behave, depending on how well the project is looked after and how well it moves. So what's important as we move forward is that we have to realize what keeps blockchain and fintech together is money. Fintech, what you're seeing now in Europe, what you're doing very successfully here in the Baltics, is accelerating the movement of money. Think of the perfect world of money. The perfect world of money is where you don't have to go to bank to get a loan. You just do barcode, you transfer, it's done. We have created all these layers over time with regulation, laws, and so on, which transform people's attitude to funding and to how we live our lives. And a lot of the weight of that is due to regulation. Today, what we're seeing in the Bitcoin world, and I was part of these risk groups in 2008 when the world nearly fell apart. If people tell you the 2008 crisis was big, I wasn't a bank when it happened. I thought we were going to have the army in the streets. There was no more cash anywhere. Nothing. People, yes, the government's managing it and all that. No, it was a really close call. And what's happening with this world is that you're finding that all these little fintechs are doing wonderful things. My definition of a fintech is a bit different than what you'll have everywhere else. My definition of a fintech is that you have an expert at a topic, a very specific topic. It can be a lending to an SME with technology and a regulatory framework just to get a razor-sharp approach to that business. And it may or may not work. In Europe, we have a big enough scale, a big enough world because we have the single currency with the euro. We have very highly competent people in continental Europe and the UK. The level of technicity I'm finding in the Baltics and in Southern Europe are just remarkable. Young engineers are everywhere. I'll give you an example of a successful fintech, which I call version 1.0. It's Cedars. Cedars, they're based in London, an American lawyer, a Portuguese engineer. The engineering is done in Lisbon. The marketing is done out of London. So they have like regulatory problems. But it's exactly the way it's going to go. I think the world is going to change more and more in Europe, and you're going to have more and more people getting together. The fact that I come from Paris to Vilnius is probably a small indication. It's really a changing world. So if you look at the blockchain world compared to fintech, it's a simple reason. It's the raw material here is money. So if you get it 1% of $1 billion market, it's very good. Money keeps on moving, keeps on flowing. So it's just starting right now. And when you look at fintechs and blockchain, it's going to be quite. that 1 billion is going to be 10 times bigger, or probably even 100 times bigger in 20 years. And fintech will probably either stagnate or not move. Financial services, I mean, I've been in this industry like for 25 years. Every country has its regulation. Every regulator says he's got the law, the legislation. Trust me. I was listening to a video of the head of the Banque de France, which is the French central bank, one of the oldest one in Europe. He's saying, no, these bitcoins won't work because you have to have a central authority of trust. Well, I think everybody's pretty educated now. We see a lot of information. That's not really going to work. What's interesting here is to see the speed at which financial services are going to be disrupted by anything that has to do with the blockchain. But this is not the important slide. If there's one slide you're going to remember, it's not this one, it's this one. Today in the world of internet, which is the far left, and the blockchain, this is the second slide, if you don't mind me saying, you should remember. Protocol layers, we all have an app on a phone. We want to do a transfer. We input all our stuff, numbers, etc. So basically what you have is a very low protocol or rules, etc. To make it very simple, it's rules of engagement, rules of doing things, and so on. There's an IT meaning to it. There's a social or diplomatic meaning to it. Blockchain will do the right-hand part. And what's going to be absolutely fascinating is that with the fintech world, especially in Europe, where you have standardized rules, and now over the last 10, 15 years, the European Union has implemented extremely interesting concept and rules which uniformize different things. You're going to have a fintech status for Europeans, which I think is very interesting. What's important to the protocol is that you have the same meaning to things. Well, I'm not a big fan of political institutions. What I find very interesting in the European Union, the European Parliament, I worked briefly for them, is that 30% of the budget of the European Union Parliament is translation. What's interesting is that it's a huge number. And at first I was in shock. But what's interesting is that they define the words legally in each language. And each language has specificities. So when you do an app or you do a development, you're going to have the same protocol. The numbers will mean the same thing in every country. And that's extremely powerful in an environment like the European Union. And that will enable all the fintechs to scale up once we're past the individual regulatory frameworks that we have in different countries. And that will help the protocol layer. The protocol layer will be all the loans, will be all your personal information down the road. And this is not 20 years from now. This is 5 years from now. It's all your payment history, etc. And you will have access to it. It'll be you will be owning it. And then you'll be able to build your own financial portfolio or loans or being able to borrow in a much quicker way. And the app part will be the small one. So that's kind of basically where we're at right now. And I think this was done about a year ago. It's changing considerably. It's just a new protocol. That's a new blockchain. The blockchain technology is just quite simple, actually. The conceptual aspect of a decentralized ledger with one protocol, single protocol, is extremely powerful. That's something which is not going to go back, and it's going to be very, very impactful in the European Union. Here we go, more of the same. Infrastructure. Infrastructure is probably the place where financial infrastructure, where there's going to be the most disruption. You have today, everybody has a bank account. Everybody has a securities account in the European Union. You have an ISIN code, and every year the bank takes off 0.10% of any security you own, whether it's a fund, it's an equity, and so on. So you have these big organizations like Euroclear, which are quite good, which responded to a need at a given time, but cannot last the way it is in a hyper-centralized, hyper-confidential, untransparent way of transferring securities to the banks and so on. So the infrastructure with the new ledgers that'll come up will be very, very interesting. But in this infrastructure thing, and this is a bit of a boring topic, but it's at the core of it, you'll have the same thing with real estate. You'll have same thing with being traceability of food. Where was the food kept? I'm working on a wine blockchain right now. That's really fun. It's really interesting to see the traceability of where the grapes come from, how it goes, where it gets distributed, which shop, how long it stays. All this type of information, once it's input on a basic protocol, is going to be extremely, extremely productive. The same thing is going to happen to finance. So it's going to be very, very exciting to see how we move. And actually, Europe is a bit like Canada for that, is a very open society where you have a lot of different nations challenging each other, which I think is extremely healthy, not as nations, but as ways of thinking. Because when you speak a language, you think in a language. A language is first a means of thought, much more than a means of communication. So this kind of gives you a summary of how we all think it's going to happen. The first one that's going to be disrupted, is our call, is payment. Payment's going to be disrupted super hard, and the whole thing will be finished when we deal with infrastructure, i.e. custody. Who owns what? Whether it's information, your own personal information, or it's real estate, or it's art, or it's a securities account. So while this is not directly related to fintech, it gives you the scope which is possible today. Today, fintechs are version 1.0. Tomorrow, 2.0 is when everything goes on blockchain and different types of ledgers and how we interact on the blockchain. And I think both steps are necessary. The speed at which, like I'm looking at, like last week I got an email from TransferGo on saying they're going to have Bitcoin or Litecoin and all that. That's exactly the way it's going to happen. Slowly, these 1.0 startups are going to go into the crypto world and open that, which is going to be much more far-reaching than most people think. VCs entering the ICO market. It's important to know where the money comes from, money or capital, okay? It's traditional funds. Hedge funds are very, very, very helpful for this. I know this is not commonly accepted in continental Europe, but hedge funds are very creative people, very smart people, people that look at opportunity, bring this element of speculation. And when you hear speculation, think liquidity. Somebody's going to buy the asset, buy the token, and so on. People are having all these hopes about tokens and ICOs. 90%, we think 90% of the tokens of ICOs will go to zero, which is a number like in VCs, but the ones that survive will be liquid, so you'll have an exit. Because the ones that are at zero in a VC fund, which is not liquid, it's worth nothing, fundamentally. But if the tokens give you the liquidity, you're going to have a lot more going in that respect. So these are just basic examples of what we see of VC funds happening. I'm doing like traditional fundraising with some people, and the companies are doing ICOs. I have these like Swiss, French, and Belgian funds saying, oh, we're against the ICO, it's money laundering and so on. And then the founder says, oh, we'll give you a few tokens. Oh, go ahead with the ICO. So everybody's going to slowly get into the ICO world in a traditional sense because these VC funds don't have the right or the legal acceptance by their regulator to put tokens. So if you give it to them, they'll take it. And it's a good education scheme in the world that we're going into. This is my company. It's Unicorns. I'd like to really thank the Mantas. Are you here? Where is he? He's gone. Well, he organized this for me, invited me, so thank you very much. Startup Lithuania also. Thanks, Mantas. That's him over there. Big hand for Mantas. Thank you very much. And last night's party, TransferGo was great. Who's from TransferGo here? They're too important. They're gone. Well, thanks very much. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. This presentation will be available for all. Open society, you know, transparency, it's part of it. At Avolta, we hunt unicorns. So if you know any unicorns, I'm a good hunter for unicorns. Have a great afternoon. Thanks a lot for everything.